This is a different type of committee meeting today. I guess I keep trying to figure out a way to make people understand what exactly we're doing. So this morning, this is an ad hoc committee presentation on coal ash. We worked to put together this presentation for the Full House Natural Resource Committee. So it's a full committee, but the ad hoc committee on coal ash has put together this presentation. Before we begin, I'll ask Representative Hardin to open us with a prayer, please.
Let us pray. Father in heaven, we come to you this morning thanking you for the many blessings that you bestow upon us. Father, we will be talking this morning about things that affect the world that you've given us, this wonderful world that you made for us. And we just pray, Father, that you would lead our deliberations, the decisions we make would be those that would be pleasing to you and would be in your will. These things we pray in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. So let me introduce, first of all, to our full committee and to our audience and those listening here, that for over 2 years we have explored, considered legislation, talked with EPD, trying to find different ways to get a handle of understanding and get ahead on this issue. And so this year, on March the 2nd, I appointed Buddy Hardin, Chuck Williams, Chad Emmer, and I added Jan Tankersley, who has a local government background, and Dan Gasaway and Sam Watson's our committee chair and vice chair. Sam Watson's the vice chair. Dan is the secretary. So we are going to spend some time listening to our committee members and to other concerns we get expressed to us through public interest, also other House members, and we're trying to get as much information as we can out there to help us all understand this subject. First of all, I want to say there is a lot of misinformation surrounding this issue. I hope this meeting, which is live and then will be archived, will be helpful to the committee members, the full House, and the general public. This should provide a baseline of information on this important issue. And I'll repeat that. I have hopes that this archived meeting will provide a baseline of information on this important issue. As we're learning about the subject, things keep changing, but it is my opinion that overall the citizens of Georgia need to understand a little bit more what's going on, as do I and our committee members. But at the same time, I think we need to pause and recognize what our state agency is doing by way of dispensing the information and what our good corporate citizens, such as Georgia Power, are doing to reassure and to be good stewards of the environment. So for now, as Representative Emmer is here, and you're number 18? 14? Okay. So 2 weeks ago, I think it was, I had him walk out 25 feet in this chamber. And so I'm going to give him another role today just to introduce Rick Dunn. Representative Emmer has been one of the ad hoc committee members talking with EPD and working, as we all have over the past 2 years, of how to give the general public more information about this subject matter. And I want to thank Representative Emmer. And then we had Representative Workhauser with his legislation and Representative Jeff Jones. And then all of us involved in, again, trying to get a handle on this, being good stewards, and letting our public know. So if you'll just introduce Representative Dunn, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. You introduce Director Dunn?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And the website presentation.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, he took his lines up pretty well, didn't he, y'all? I just wanted to recognize your effort.
All right, well, thank you very much. And Madam Chair and committees of the members and those in attendance, I'd like to welcome Director Dunn from EPD here this morning. And I want to thank you publicly. I know the chairwoman has said it. I appreciate you and Ms. Curry being an open door and in an open and running dialogue through this entire process and your efforts. What I saw last week, y'all worked very diligently to try to get some things up by a deadline for us and get a notification page launched and ready to go. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Director, and thank you again for being here and look forward to you sharing.
Thank you, Representative Emmer. Beth Blaylock to join me as well. Again, thank you, Representative Emmer, Chairwoman Smith, members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. This is our fourth meeting this session on coal ash. And Representative Smith, you mentioned a baseline, and I thought I'd just take a second to kind of give us kind of a historical timeline of where we are up to right now. I think everyone knows, and I'll be very brief, I think everyone knows that in the fall of 2015, the EPA issued its coal combustion residuals rule for for disposal of CCR at electric utilities. That was the product probably of 5 years of work on behalf of the federal government. And I think EPD, we were certainly supportive of the rule. We saw some rather notable gaps. First of all was there was no real enforcement mechanism associated with the federal rule. Number two, it did not cover the coal ash disposal at inactive electric utilities. And number three, you know, the EPA rule would result in a lot of excavation of existing wet coal ash. Some of that coal ash will go to on-site landfills, but a lot of that coal ash would go to municipal solid waste landfills. And so we felt it was important to strengthen the rules of our municipal solid waste landfills as well. So EPD began work on a rule, a state rule, associated with CCR starting that winter. We began stakeholder hearings, or stakeholder meetings on draft rules later on that winter and through the spring. Had a couple of those meetings, I believe, Beth, is that correct? And by April or May, we were able to brief the DNR board on a proposed CCR rule for Georgia. Over that summer, we held a couple of public hearings. We had thousands of comments. We read those comments, reviewed, discussed, responded to each of those comments. And in October, we presented a final rule to the DNR board, which they then adopted. And I believe Chairwoman Smith, a lot of members of this committee, we were together in December, and we briefed you on those rules up in Athens as well. Getting back to the two particular bills that were introduced this session in the House, I think in the first two meetings, EPD expressed some concerns about the bill. I won't go into those concerns right now, but I think they can basically summarize that we felt as if those rules were largely duplicative of the work I've described that was already being done. The third hearing, which I believe was on March the 1st or March the 2nd, it really wasn't about the bills at all. We focused on, as you mentioned, Chairwoman Smith, public notice. And we heard clearly from the committee that, you know, we need to look at ways of how to give the public a little more notice of what's going on. And as Representative Emmer said, we began work and thinking of ways that we can accomplish that goal. So what we did on, excuse me, on last Tuesday, we established a web page that would contain all, you know, we talked about how can we provide the public information when we receive a coal ash management plan from a landfill? How can we notify the public when we receive a dewatering plan from an electric utility? So we established a web page that places those notices where the public can see. Not only does it place the notice, but it also includes a copy of the plan as well for the public to look at as well, what we're looking at. There was some concern about the public being able, you know, people are not looking at our webpage every day, seeing if there's updates. So we've also included a mechanism where individuals, citizens, anyone can sign up for a notification that there's been a new notice posted via email. So instead of checking it every day, you'll get a notice saying, hey, there's been a new dewatering plan added, or there's been a new CCR management plan added as well. I've got a handout that just kind of shows you the web address for the coal ash information plan is epd.georgia.gov/coal-ash-information. You don't have to remember that website because there's numerous ways you can get there. That first page is the epd.georgia.gov website, and you'll see circled right at the top of the web page is a link for coal ash information that takes you to that page. You could also get to the page. Each of our branches have home pages. So on our water branch homepage and our land branch homepage, there's also a link to the coal ash website as well. There's also links to the coal ash website under our news, where we contain all of our public announcements that individuals could get to the website. If you flip over to the second page, this is the coal ash information webpage. You'll see 2 links there. There's a link for coal ash pond dewatering plans. There's also a link for CCR management plans as well. Again, the first one is the dewatering. The second one are plans associated with landfills. And you'll see below where you can sign up for email updates. All you do is enter your email address. Every time there's something added to either of those pages, you would be notified if you had signed up. The third slide is just a screenshot of, if you press that link that says coal ash pond dewatering plans, it'll take you to this page. Already included on that page are the 2 dewatering plans we have received to date. That's from Plant McManus and Plant McDonough. Again, there's the notice that we are proposing. There's also the link. I don't have a screenshot of the link, but if you clicked on that link, you'll actually see a PDF of the plans that were submitted for those 2 plants as well. And the final page is the CCR management plans that are submitted by landfills. Under our rule, which was effective November 22nd, 2016, these plans have to be submitted prior to the receipt of any coal ash, or if you're a landfill that has previously accepted coal ash, you have up to 180 days from the effective date of the rule to submit your plan, and that 180-day date is May 22nd, 2017. So to date, we have not received any CCR management plans, but we will put those plans, put notice on the website, as well as a copy of those plans as we receive them there. So that's an update. Madam Chair, again, this emphasis from the committee last time was how to give the public more info, and that's what we've done to date.
Thank you very much. This is now the time for committee to ask any questions if they have any, or actually you can make comments since it's not an official committee meeting. Any comments? Number 25.
So not a time for questions?
No, that's fine. Questions or comments.
Okay, Madam Chairman, if
Just not long.
okay. How many coal ash ponds are in Georgia,
29, is that right, Jack?
and how many are owned by Georgia Power, if you don't mind to follow up?
The 29 that we're referring to are at 10 coal-fired or 11 power plants that either burn coal today or did at some point in their history. We've got one other very, very, very small municipal facility that's a power plant. It's not the same order of magnitude as these. It's not on the same sort of time frame for retirement. So, I mean, we're really focusing on the 29 ponds at the 11 Georgia Power facilities.
Okay, so just
Further
to make sure
question?
I'm- yes, if you don't mind. To make sure I'm understanding, there are 29 ponds. All of them are under the watch and management of Georgia Power, which is why they're the only company listed here.
Correct.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Uh-huh. Any other questions? Yes, number 14.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a comment, not a question. I want to make sure that to the committee and those in attendance and those that will be listening or going back to watch, one of the things that I wanted to point out that Director Dunn, not that he didn't point it out, but while at our last full committee meeting, public notice was a topic of conversation, the construction of this web page didn't just happen after that conversation is what I found out. A lot of this work and the opportunity to go retrieve data was there. What you've done is made it a lot easier, and you could sign up to be notified now instead of going and actually looking for the data. Now you can opt to be notified, and with smart devices today, you may not be in your hometown to get a paper, but you can be notified wherever you are, and that's what I've understood this program to do. Is that correct?
That's correct, Representative Nimmer. This has always been public information. We're just trying to make it a little easier to access.
Okay. I want to, Madam Chair,
Yes.
further comment. Thank you.
Number 21.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just looking at this short description of the sites, and it looks good. I'm not a real computer whiz, but I think I could probably access this information. And you feel confident that this will answer questions, most questions that would be maybe asked by the general public, or?
I'm not sure. I mean, the plans can be somewhat technical, so I'm not quite sure if the plans will answer all the questions, but it certainly, we feel as if this is the most efficient and effective way to provide that notice to the general public.
But it does give the general public notice, and if they desire more technical explanation, then they can contact whoever they would
That's correct.
desire. Okay. Thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you. Representative Emmer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And not to put words in the director, EPD, or anybody's mouths, but Chairman Harden, I had the same question, kind of, will this answer all the questions? I don't think we'll ever answer them all. As things evolve and different plants and different ponds and different MSWs across the state have issues, I think we're all going to always encounter new questions and new curiosities out there from our public. But I think what we've got here, the way I understand, is the construction of a landing page that we can add to additional information as things come up. So while it may not have the answer there right away, if we see that there's something we can go from my understanding working with you guys last week and the week prior, it can be added to if we discover there's some other curiosities out there. So I mean, I would say yes.
Need to comment? Yes.
I just wanted to clarify that the management plans are based on our guidance document, which is exactly what 388 was constructed off of. And that guidance document is supposed to be a living document. As we know more and as we need to add, we can add to that, which will then be represented in the management plans online. So yes.
And this is Beth Blaylock, the Deputy Director of the Land Branch. Jeff Cowan is at a meeting on the coast today, so.
Thank you. Number 24.
Madam Chair, just point of clarification. They have a part of this presentation today, and then Georgia Power is going to have a part. I saw it. I just want to make sure. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
This is a two-part presentation today.
Thank you.
And yes, so we'll go into a lot more detail on the actual process. Are there any other questions now for EPD? So y'all, when everything gets compressed into about a 15-minute presentation, it kind of gives you no idea of all the work that goes in behind the preparation for this. And I will say EPD has listened to us, because all of this has not just come up since early March. We have been in conversation at our policy academy at the University of Georgia last winter. So this is just ongoing, but I want to thank your division for all the efforts of making something that is going to be easier for the general public and frankly for all of us to be able to access as well. So thank you very much for your presentation. And we'll be getting ready for part 2 of our presentation. And one of the comments I got from several committee members is that we're being told what's going on when Coal Ash Pond is being closed, but we all need to see it more than just hear about it. So I've asked Georgia Power to actually take us through the actual processes they use when a coal ash pond is closed. So I think Aaron Mitchell with Georgia Power, and they will, I guess, go ahead now and give us the PowerPoints to hand out. And so this part we will be able to follow step by step what actually goes on. So one of the reasons I want our meeting to be held this way today is that these live meetings are live right now, so anybody can click and pay attention, watch this meeting, but it will also be archived. So we as legislators can refer people to this website if they have any questions, and then we too can use this as a basis for more information ourselves. So, and I'm going to turn this on. Okay, we're ready when you are.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee.
Turn the volume.
I'll continue on till the projector comes up there. So today, I guess what we've prepared is an overview of our activities related to ash ponds. What I'd like to do is walk through, I won't rehash what Director Dunn mentioned about regulations. I thought it was a nice summary, but just to show you the regulations that we are operating under as we proceed on our ash pond closure process, not only from a solid waste standpoint, but from a water regulatory standpoint as well. I'll give you a quick summary of our strategy and plans behind how we will close our ponds. And then, in light of discussion throughout the session, I'd like to move, thank you, I'd like to move on to discussing water and how we are handling the dewatering process. At any point, please interrupt me and ask additional questions.
That might not be safe. We might not let you get out of here today. So make a note of your questions, and then when you're through with your presentation, you can refer back to your slides as we have questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Let's do it that way. Thank you.
Okay. So as Director Dunn said, in 2015, EPA, federal EPA, came out with a coal combustion residuals rule, which regulated, and I want to emphasize, certain ash ponds, not all of them. Following that, last year, Georgia EPD and the Department of Natural Resources developed a rule in Georgia that regulated all of our ash ponds. Following up on a question earlier, Georgia Power has 29 ash ponds at our coal-fired power plants. 6 of those are currently still in use and receiving coal combustion residuals. In addition, EPA also issued, in somewhat coordinated fashion with the federal CCR rule, new effluent limitations guidelines regulating basically the discharge of wastewater from coal-fired power plants for certain types of wastewater. Georgia Power, and I'll show you a slide next, that these things work together, and these rules have led us down the path of developing a comprehensive strategy, not focusing just on one regulation, but as they all focus on similar waste streams, our strategy addresses all of those. One additional regulation I wanted to point out, and getting towards our discussion on water later in the presentation, is the state of Georgia rules for water quality control. Those also regulate our wastewater discharges and have since their inception, or since the plant's operations, if they were developed after the rules were created. Those are in existence, and I'll go into some more detail there, but regulated and gives EPD the authority to tell us how to control, report, et cetera, on our wastewater discharges. Slide 3, just a reference to our integrated compliance strategy. So right now we utilize ash ponds for treatment and settling of coal ash and other wastewater associated with coal-fired power plants. A couple of different rules regulate how we operate those. Right now, when we burn and combust coal, we handle certain of those ash byproducts by water and move those to the ash pond. The ash pond serves as a treatment system to settle those solids out. We do some additional treatment as well and discharge our water in compliance with our permits. That's also monitored. In order for us to change that wet handling of ash, we have significant construction projects underway where we are converting all that wet ash handling to dry ash handling. A couple of pictures there in the center and on the right of your screen depict those new systems that we are currently installing at our 6 coal-fired power plants that remain operating, so that we will not handle ash in a wet fashion going forward. We intend to stop use of ash ponds for those CCR materials sometime in the 2019 timeframe. That effort, as well as, remember I mentioned some water rules as well. The picture on the left is just a depiction of significant construction and undertaking that we will complete to install additional wastewater treatment to comply with new regulations as well. all told, that is hundreds of millions of dollars of investment at our power plants to move us to that point of dry ash handling and compliance with new, more stringent regulations. Okay, next slide, slide 4. So I'd like to talk a little bit about what we have communicated about our plans. On the next slide, I'll go into some detail about how we will close ash ponds. A couple of points. In 2015, in September, we announced that we were closing all 29 of our ash ponds. Something of note is that decision is not required by regulation until sometime in the 2019 timeframe. You can go down the complying with the rules, and you have until 2019 to decide whether you will continue to operate ash ponds or close the ponds. We elected in 2015 to say we are moving beyond the ash pond operation and going to close all ponds. As we continued to work down the rest of that page on the slide, you will notice that we have announced additional details of our plans to close our ponds as our engineers have continued to work on that design and process. In March, we provided a timeline of how we will close our ponds, and you see those listed there. Again, that was not required until October of 2016, but we are committed to communicating those details as we learn them, knowing that there is interest. In June, we communicated the methodology of how we close our ponds, and I'll go into some more detail of that as well on the next slide. In October through the present and continuing on, we've communicated monitoring data. We're required to monitor groundwater and other things around and associated with our ash ponds. We've posted that information to our website as well as provided those copies to EPD. I want to point out that that is not required until first quarter of 2018. But again, illustration of the fact that we plan to continue to communicate details of what we're doing as those details are made available to us, or we furthered our design and engineering plans associated with our ash ponds. Okay, we'll flip on to slide 5. High-level details of how we will close our ponds, but first a couple of principles that Georgia Power has set for ourselves. So each of the ash ponds, as you may be aware, are different. Each of our plants are designed differently. Where they are located is different, areas of the state, geology, et cetera. Because of that, each of our ash ponds will get unique treatment, specific design on our closure plans and how we will treat and handle that ash at that specific plant. The second principle there is we've elected to install additional wastewater treatment systems throughout this process. I'll go into more detail there, but those treatment systems are brought on site and installed prior to us engaging in ash pond closure processes. Of our 29 ash ponds, and this is something where Georgia Power has set itself apart from other utilities and gone above and beyond what is required in the regulations. 17 of those ash ponds that are located closest to lakes or rivers, we will completely excavate that ash and either dispose of it in a permitted facility or close it with other ash ponds where we can employ some other closure methodology. Those other 12 ash ponds, we will not simply cap in place. We've elected, again, something different that Georgia Power has employed to design and install additional advanced engineering methods associated with the closure of those ash ponds. Those methods, again, will be site-specific, depending on the site requirements, the size, shape, volume of ash in the pond, all aimed at enhancing groundwater protection as we close these ponds. So there's been a lot of discussion about capping in place. not only in Georgia, but across the industry. Georgia Power is not simply capping in place these ash ponds. We're employing additional technologies and engineering as just discussed. As we complete and further our engineering designs on these ponds, we will communicate that information as available as we've demonstrated and just talked about on the last slide. The last piece there, just for knowledge, we will look for every opportunity to recycle ash as we remove it from ponds. We're engaged in a couple of those ventures right now to see, is it viable, is the market there? The ash that we generate, on the other hand, we recycle more than 50% of ash and gypsum that we currently generate. And it could be more based on the facility. For example, we have a very large facility near Macon, Plant Sharer. Last year, we recycled nearly 93% of the fly ash that we generated. That product is valuable for the building and materials market, and we will continue to explore and fully utilize those opportunities as we go forward. So I want to transition a little bit from closure plans to focus in on wastewater. So if you go to slide 6. Talk about current state. So we're currently regulated under our wastewater permits, NPDES, National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permits issued to us by Georgia EPD. Those permits, as you can see, include all wastewater from the plant. The majority of that is cooling water that we use in the electricity generation process, other plant processes of smaller volumes, and also including ash pond discharge. We have limits, reporting requirements, and significant testing that we have to perform and provide EPD before we can receive those permits and upon renewal of those permits. All that information resides at EPD. Excuse me. Transitioning on from current state into the dewatering process. Prior to dewatering, our permits require us to notify EPD of a change in operation at our plants. At two of our facilities, Plant McDonough and Plant McManus, we have begun dewatering operation. In both occasions, we have provided that prior notice to EPD of that change in operation and process. EPD is required by law and rule to evaluate that change in process and inform us as the permittee whether or not additional steps are required or additional information is required for EPD to determine if we're in compliance with our permit and rules and water quality standards. In the cases that we've talked about so far, EPD has requested additional information and can request more at any time when they see fit, as we are submitting the monitoring information throughout the dewatering process. EPD has the authority also to have site visits to evaluate our treatment systems, our processes associated with ash pond closure on the waste side, but also on the water side. EPD has been out to visit one of our sites to validate the dewatering plan that we submitted, and also, I believe, educate themselves on the process and ask us for additional information. Each of the dewatering plans that we develop to accomplish this task are site-specific. They provide our on-site employees and contractors operations, monitoring, and reporting guidance, the limitations you have to operate the system within, and the parameters of which you cannot operate and need to cease operation. I mentioned ahead of time, but after the notice and prior to dewatering activities take place, we are installing additional wastewater treatment systems. I've got a slide later on that I'd like to walk you through a representation of those treatment systems. But before we do that, on slide 7, I'd like to talk about the dewatering plans and their contents at a high level. To start, our plans are reviewed and approved by EPD before we can go forward and implement the dewatering plans. We worked with EPD on the first 2 plants, Plant McIntosh and McDonough and McManus, that's in Atlanta and Brunswick, respectively. We've worked with EPD throughout their evaluation of those plans, providing them current monitoring data and additional details, and would expect to do that going forward as EPD has information needs. The plans at a high level include some fairly detailed explanation, diagrams, et cetera, of the design of the wastewater treatment system itself, walking through each of the stages, its intent or the purpose for that stage, and then the ultimate outcome and monitoring requirements and reporting requirements. Something that's built into each of our systems are real-time monitoring information that allows us to have reliability controls. What that means is if our treatment system operates outside the parameters that we set, which are set and designed to meet the water quality standards expected for our discharge by EPD, at any time that system goes outside of those parameters, that system shuts down and sends that water back to the ash pond so that we don't discharge that water to a water body where it does not meet standards. I'll show you that on the next slide. In addition, there are additional requirements for monitoring. I believe we've added 21 constituents that are monitored and submitted on a monthly basis. The monitoring frequency is a bit more often than monthly basis. That includes those 21 constituents and 9 metals that currently we don't monitor for except for the full suite when we apply for a permit. So additional monitoring requirements have been added through EPD and our dewatering plans. Those monitoring constituents coincide with Region 4 EPA beliefs or instructions to other states on these are the set of parameters that you should be looking at for ash pond dewatering. So it is consistent from what EPA Region 4 has required or weighed in at other states and utilities. In addition to monitoring our discharge, we also monitor the receiving water body. So if it is a river, we are monitoring upstream and downstream of our discharge, as well as our discharge, and that information is being provided to EPD so that EPD can review that data and determine if there is any impact on water quality as a result of our activities. We've covered reporting. All of our treatment, sampling, data analysis, and report generation, we've elected to employ third-party contractors and accredited third-party laboratories to complete that analysis and compile that data. All that is being done at arm's length, and then we're providing that data to Georgia EPD for their evaluation. EPD has reviewed that data and determined that there is no impact on water quality for the sites we've mentioned so far where we've begun dewatering activities. Okay, slide 8. So this is a generic depiction of our water treatment systems that we're installing. Again, this is graphical representation so that we can explain and talk about what we're doing here. Some of the systems will look different. They may be not as permanent looking as we see here on the slide, but the intent and the function is the same. So today, before we get into the specifics of the treatment systems, today that treatment system does not exist, right? We have ash ponds designed to treat the water as well as some other ancillary treatment of the ash pond. That water is discharged to the receiving body, the water body, and that water meets all state standards today. What we are doing in the dewatering process is adding this treatment system. I will talk through at a high level, and then at the appropriate time, please ask any additional questions. What I'd like you to get a sense of is this is a rather sizable treatment system. We're going through a great expense at each site to ensure that these treatment systems are operational and we have the appropriate controls in place so that we meet the expectations of our permit, EPD, and protect water quality standards. Just walking through here from step 1 to 6, we have large tanks basically that give our system a consistent feed so that once our system is designed by our engineers and our certified wastewater treatment plant operators, that system operates as efficiently as possible. As you go through steps 2, 3, and 4, basically those seek to capture any solids that may make it through our discharge or be present in the pond. And those solids are basically removed or encouraged to drop out of the solution before it goes to step 6, which is a filtration. And the filtration occurs in a couple of stages. It's either packed sand bed filters and a combination of other filter presses or other types of filtration to ensure that we've cleaned up the water to the standards expected by EPD and so that we meet water quality standards. The final step there, 7, the little red roof, is a representation of that monitoring and reliability control that I mentioned previously. We have real-time monitoring parameters set up and coordinated with discharge parameters so that if anything is outside of where it needs to be, that treatment system is shut off and that water is returned back to the pond or back to the beginning of the water treatment process. That final step I talked about is not depicted on here to not add too many lines on there, but there are additional pipes that run back either to the ash pond or the beginning of that process. Okay. Proceed to slide 9. So I want to talk a little bit about availability of information. So I talked up front about the communications and the things that we have announced about our plans and our intent to close our ponds, how we're going to go about it, and the treatment systems that we will install. This is the information that Georgia Power has already posted or is in the process of posting and will continue to post to our own website as well as submit to EPD. I want to talk through the list fairly quickly. So we will have general information on our dewatering process, not unlike what I shared today. That graphic, which is new, will likely be posted to our website with an explanation of our process and controls in place on dewatering and water treatment. We will also have our site-specific dewatering plans. We intend to post those to our website, as well as we understand EPD may be posting those as well. Summary reports. So our dewatering process, I mentioned the additional monitoring requirements that EPD is requiring us to submit on a monthly basis as plants begin the dewatering process. I mentioned we're having a third party prepare those. We intend to create a summary that is in a more digestible fashion for those that may be interested, rather than the technical spreadsheets that EPD gets. Our consultant will produce those more digestible summaries, and we will be posting those to our website. For those that are interested, can find all the information there on the website. In addition, that joins information already there on our ash pond closure process, which we talked about, how we're closing our ponds, the method and which ponds specifically will be closed, and then groundwater monitoring data. I mentioned earlier that data is not required to be submitted to EPD until 2018. We have already begun last October posting that groundwater monitoring data to our website, and will continue to do so. Finally, inspection reports. We're required to do inspections of our ash ponds. Those reports and their findings are posted on our website. This list is not all-inclusive. There are many other documents posted and information about each of the plants and each of the ponds out on our website. So updates will continue. On top of that, there are many regulatory submittals that EPD is receiving from us and requiring us to submit on a monthly, quarterly, and annual basis. And then finally, I'll conclude, we are continuing and will continue to close our ponds as expeditiously and safely as possible. We are cognizant that we live in communities, we're neighbors there too, and we want to ensure that our closure process is least impactful as possible to our neighbors. We'll continue to communicate information. We have begun the process of preparing to permit under EPD's new CCR rule. Our engineers are working on those applications, and EPD will be receiving some of those, a number of those, in a few months this year. Finally, I hope we've demonstrated we've had an open dialogue. We'll continue that open dialogue as we go forward. Many of the actions that we're taking are not required, and we're going above and beyond on the methods that we're closing the ponds, the way and the process in which we're closing the ponds, including water quality. In addition, the majority of the information that we're sharing is either not required, or we're posting it in some cases 1.5 years in advance of requirements. We intend to continue that and continue to communicate openly as we go throughout the process.
Thank you for your presentation. If y'all have any questions, go ahead and indicate that. And then to start off, will you go to slide 8, which is your schematic?
Yes, ma'am.
And one of the things a lot of the committee members have told me, is there any way that there's toxic wastewater dumping into our rivers?
No, ma'am.
Can we say that again?
No, ma'am. So one thing I wanted to be clear of is this wastewater treatment system does not exist today, right? The pond system itself is a treatment system. That water is tested for priority pollutant sampling. That information sits at Georgia EPD in those files. EPD would not issue us a permit to operate a wastewater system if we had toxic waste dumping into our streams and rivers, or if our discharge caused or contributed to an issue with a water quality standard. That exists today. What we're doing here is on top of that. So we're ensuring with robust systems that we do not cause water quality issues going forward.
Thank you.
Yes,
So let's ask our one question, and then we'll go back around if we need to again. And I forgot to tell y'all, identify yourselves as I call on you. So number 14.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chad Emmer. On your diagram on page 8, just out of curiosity, I know you referenced the pipes that will come out of the red roof building the monitoring shed. Yes. Just out of curiosity, does that water, if there's a detection in there that would not let it go into the river or lake, does it go back to the ash pond or back to the equalization tank?
So far, our systems, the two systems we have designed today go back to the ash pond.
Okay, so it just starts literally all the way back over.
That's right.
Okay.
So it's treated water. Basically, what we're monitoring is the level of solids or pH on that discharge, which is an indication that we either we need some maintenance on our system, or the monitor's out of whack, and we just need to send that back for additional treatment and additional evaluation before we discharge it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Number 15.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm Tom McCall from up in northeast Georgia, right on the South Carolina line. And depending on who you talk to, coal ash can be anything from as dangerous as Agent Orange to as inert as a concrete slab. When y'all get through with your whole process and it gets to the point of either y'all storing it or it gets on a truck and goes to a permitted landfill, what's I don't know how to say it. I don't want to say what's the danger, but what's the chance of any leachate coming out of the processed coal ash that's in a permitted landfill and getting into the ground or groundwater or anything? Or is it even a chance of that?
So I'll speak to your question as a regulated entity, and perhaps EPD could weigh in. So the rules that we mentioned up front, in this case, if it's disposed, the Solid Waste Management Act and solid waste management rules in Georgia require, and the CCR rule, the new CCR rule, require us to design a facility, if Georgia Power were to own and operate that landfill, which we do operate several on our plant sites. That landfill has to be designed to specific criteria specified in the rules, evaluated by EPD, and stamped and approved by a professional engineer, certifying that the design meets the standards and the criteria of the regulations, which are designed to prevent any leachate or leaking of that solid waste facility. As far as transportation, you mentioned trucks. In occasions where we do truck ash off-site to a permitted facility, we have a pretty robust inspection plan to look at each and every truck. Our trucks are tracked to ensure that they're following safety and local highway safety rules. Before they leave the plant site, they're visually inspected to ensure that they're buttoned up, covers in place, they're clean before they hit the road. And as well, when they leave the waste facility, the same inspection process occurs to ensure that we're running a clean process.
Thank you. Number 16.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to go back to the monitoring of groundwater.
Yes,
I see here in the handout that you started on August 16th, or maybe even started before. Is that data going to EPD? Are they analyzing it? And has anything seen anything unusual in any groundwater data?
Yeah. So thanks, Representative. We did start earlier than August. I think we were at a point that we received groundwater data by August and had evaluated those first rounds. A little bit of background is that the EPA's CCR rule and Georgia EPD's CCR rule requires us to monitor groundwater. It requires us to do some background monitoring and requires that over about a year and a half period, where we'll take at least 8 different rounds of sampling to evaluate and statistically look at the quality of that groundwater. EPD does have that data, as well as we've posted it on our website. At this point, that data are snapshots. We haven't done the full evaluation yet. That will occur later this year and early next, and that will also be submitted. We have around our ponds and landfills, we have approximately 500 groundwater monitoring wells.
Wow.
Those will be monitored throughout the background period, but also for at least 30 years after we close these facilities, all data reported to EPD. Around our ash ponds, of the approximately 237 wells that we have, I believe 214 of those meet all state standards for regulated substances in groundwater. The others, 23, I believe, 25, 23, check my math. The substances that we have detected, so far, we need to continue monitoring throughout that background period to determine if it's naturally occurring or something else. In those cases, though, it is confined to Georgia Power's property for those regulated substances.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. We're getting close to 9 o'clock. I think we can stay over a little bit in this room, but if you have other committee meetings, certainly understand if you need to leave. So again, let's keep our questions brief if we can. Number 21.
Thank you. Buddy Harden from District 148, which is Chris, Wilcox, Pulaski, and Houston counties. Mine is more of, you answered my earlier question than it is a question. But as I been through it with EPD and with you, then EPA standards were not as tight as EPD standards are. They tightened those standards. And then in addition, Georgia Power goes beyond the standards that even EPD has put together, because their early groundwater monitoring, the real-time monitoring of the effluent, and following the NPDES standards. So, I guess to say my answer to my earlier question is yes. I think that any question that the public has, by looking at the EPD site, which contains your closure plans, and then if they don't find there, if they go to Georgia Power, then I think I just want to compliment Georgia Power on being a great corporate citizen, and EPD and Georgia Power for working together to see that the public is informed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Number 23.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chuck Williams from the Athens area. Mr. Mitchell, can you just briefly sort of give us the history of how we got to this point? Georgia Power has been producing electricity from coal for decades and decades, I assume. So looking back, how has the utility disposed of coal ash in the past? When did it start? When did you start using the pond system? Sort of what got us to this point?
Yeah. Good question.
In 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay. I'll try to beat that. So, the use of ash ponds and water to move ash basically to ash ponds has been around a long time. It was industry practice when, a long time ago, when 50 plus years ago, when coal-fired power plants were being built and operated. We've continued to operate that way. Newer plants are more sophisticated and handle things in different ways than much of those older plants, which have since retired. Speaking to how ash has been handled, I would like to differentiate the state of Georgia from other surrounding states. Director Dunn talked about EPA took more than 5 years to evaluate coal ash, and how should we regulate coal ash? And after, all that time, EPA determined that coal ash should be handled as a solid waste. That came out in 2015. Prior to that, the state of Georgia has always regulated coal ash as a solid waste under the solid waste management rules. When we dispose of or have disposed of ash in Georgia, outside of our facility or on our facility, outside of ash pond operation, we've had to comply with and obtain permits from Georgia EPD on how we manage that ash. So our facilities have been designed identically to municipal solid waste facilities for years in Georgia, and that is something that Georgia, the state of Georgia, this body through passage of the Solid Waste Management Act and EPD through regulations has required us to comply with for many years.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. See number 24?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Dan Gasway, House District 28. Approximately how many surface acres are in the 29 ponds?
I don't have that number. I am happy to follow up with you on that. Some of our ponds range in size from a couple of acres to we have one pond close to 450, 500 acres. Of the bigger ponds, it is not all ash. It's mainly water. Small portions, a quarter or so of those large ponds is the actual ash and the settling of ash. I will follow up with you on the total number.
Thank you. Number 26?
I'm Debbie Buckner, and I'm from over near Columbus. I appreciate your presentation, and I'm very impressed with the fact that you're taking such good care of the water from the ash ponds. My question actually goes back now to the ash itself, and I was curious if there are any requirements that exist and that analyze the ash for harmful elements prior to them going into the landfill, so that they are categorized in some way as either hazardous waste or just regular solid waste or municipal waste?
Yes, ma'am. So the solid waste rules in Georgia, as well as the CCR rules, which is a subset of the solid waste rules, require testing of any waste that goes into a permitted facility to ensure that it meets the definition of a solid waste. So when we dispose of ash in a third party or a third party solid waste facility or on our own, we have to characterize through testing that waste, which the ash, for example, to determine exactly what you said, that it is a solid waste and it belongs in that facility and that the facility was designed to accept that waste.
Thank you.
Thank you. Number 27.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Carla Drenner. I was just doing a kind of a quick comparison between the couple bills that were introduced this session based upon your presentation. And I was looking at the federal rule. I just skimmed it briefly, so it seems to me like maybe the two differences are there's a notification requirement in the federal rule, and one of the bills asks for notification, 30-day notification before you begin the dewatering process. Can you respond to that?
Sure. So today, our existing permits, EPD requires us to have a 30-day notification of EPD of a change in process. I believe our new permits could require anywhere from 60 to 90 days notification of that change in process or the dewatering activity. We have talked to EPD. We've already given them notice up to a year of when we know that we could begin dewatering activities, and we will refine those dates with EPD as specific dates and information is available, and not just wait for that 60 or 90 days.
Can I say one more thing? I know you're in a hurry. The only other thing that I see, and you, this is a quick thing, is the bill asks for a major permit modification. You probably will be doing that as well as part of your new permitting process.
So EPD would determine whether or not a permit modification is required. That's the reason EPD requires us to submit the notification prior to engaging in a change in activity, as well as EPD requiring us to monitor not only our discharge, but the receiving stream, upstream and downstream, to determine if they need to proceed down the modification process. To date, the information we've provided has led EPD to determine that no modification is required as our discharge still meets water quality standards.
Excellent, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
One more briefly for number 15.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is to Rick, I guess, more than anything. I think it's something somewhere in the code called a dormant commerce clause that says that, we have to accept out-of-state stuff. Is the due power coal ash is coming into Georgia under the same inspection restrictions as Georgia Powers is?
Short answer is yes. They're coming into a landfill now. The dewatering is totally. That's correct.
I want to we're almost through, so I want to thank you so much for your presentation and our committee for all their questions. And this time of year, our committee members are having to move in and out for committees, so some came in late and did not hear the presentation by EPD and the notifications they have. But we will gather all this information together. I want to emphasize again, thank you so much to Georgia Power for your presentation. I think it'll go a long way in helping all of us understand a little bit better what's going on. And our committee will continue to look into the issues and welcome the comments from the full committee and others if we need to look into anything else. And again, I want to emphasize that I think we're fortunate in Georgia. We have a natural resource committee. I tell everybody we're all geeks up here, whether we look like it or not. We all want to delve into and understand the issues. And so it takes that kind of interest to be on top of it. So I want to thank our committee. I also want to thank EPD and Georgia Power in the same breath, because you've had great communication between yourselves, the effort being quality for our citizens, quality products for our citizens. So thank you for being a good steward. Thank you, EPD, for listening to us and helping us as we consider our legislation. So, but before we adjourn, we're getting ready to adjourn, I want to ask our committee members, does anybody watch Antiques Roadshow? Yeah, you men do whether you want to or not, because your wives are watching it probably. So to lead into, you'll notice that sometimes they find great treasures worth a lot of money by dumpster diving. And so next Tuesday, we're going to have a presentation similar to the type of presentation we're having now. But next Tuesday, we've already heard from the Ray and what they've done 2 years ago. And it's a smart highway in Troup County, and they are incorporating through their foundation the latest energy technology. And in the 2 years' time, we were the first committee they presented to. And the company and the foundation have a policy of as little impact on the environment as possible. So in other words, they dive in the landfills for old carpet so they can recycle that. That's one thing. So we're going to hear about that. Of course, it's 8 o'clock in the morning in this room, but it's 8 o'clock Tuesday, not Thursday, 8 o'clock Tuesday. The second thing we're going to hear about is conversion of non-recycled plastics into fuel. In other words, an effort to keep non-recyclables out of the landfill. And there's a lot of technology going on in there. So, and I promise some way or another to find some food for us at 8 o'clock Tuesday morning, because it's not a legislative day. So I will not let us be coffee starved or food starved at that point in time. And then Representative Emmer, if you want to conclude for us.
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair, I just thought it would be of interest to you and to the committee and possibly to those out there that your very own John Corbett has been on Antiques Roadshow. So I don't know if he knows, but
No.
he has been on the show.
And so the only thing I'm going to say was, he has an antique or he found antiques?
Both.
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 Okay. And I think we give rebuttal time coming up. Okay, Representative Corbett.
I found out my ancestors collected junk.
Thank y'all very much, and we stand adjourned until next Tuesday at 8 o'clock in the morning. Thank you.